Hello, and welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown.
The podcast where we watch 31 horror movies throughout the hallowed month of October.
Ranging from the critically acclaimed to film school projects gone gruesomely awry.
And we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Sully Hummel.
Now warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously while we take these movies seriously.
This is going to be, I think, a controversial and tricky little review that we're going to do. With this movie, Better Watch Out, from whatever year it's from.
Also seen as Safe Neighborhood in some searches.
Weird.
Because of some film festival or something, it was presented as that.
Right. I'm just going to say right up front that there is a big twist to this movie that happens early on, like about half an hour in.
Yeah, about a third of the way into the movie.
Yeah. So we can't talk about the movie at all without spoiling it. I didn't watch the trailer, but I heard that even the trailer doesn't spoil this twist, even though it happens so early in the movie. So basically, people watching this movie go in not knowing what they're going to see. Like, thinking
they're getting one kind of movie and getting an entirely different kind of movie, which is a dangerous thing, a dangerous game to play as a movie marketer.
Indeed. It's a little tricky. And I heard that it's supposed to look like from the trailer as a black comedy version of Home Alone, which I get where they're getting that from parts of the movie, but that's not the movie.
That is not at all the movie.
And the movie is not super funny. It's got some funny parts, but
it had some parts that made me laugh uncomfortably.
Yeah, exactly.
But not the same as like Ready or Not. There were parts that were funny, and I laughed because I was reacting to the funny and then thinking, ooh, I'm uncomfortable that I laughed at that. Like, it's different. These were, I laughed because I was uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very dark.
Yeah.
And here's the synopsis, not before getting into spoilers. It's a movie where a babysitter goes to take care of a kid, and like a home invasion happens, and she does all she can to try to keep herself and the kids safe from this home invasion. And then like on IMDb and everywhere else, it'll say something along the lines of, but it's more than it appears, or, this home invasion might be more than it seems. And that's true. And that's where we get into the spoilers and the twist. So if you'd like to see this movie, you should run away now. Otherwise,
here we go. We're about to ruin it for you.
Here it goes.
So let's get the twists out of the way. It seems as though a home invasion has happened, and then, the friend of the kid she's babysitting, babysitter is Ashley, she's babysitting Luke, and his friend Garrett surprises them at the front door. Oh, it wasn't a home invasion, it was him just messing around. Then they hear a noise upstairs. Wait a minute, it wasn't just him, and there's a thing, I can't believe you were in the backyard. I wasn't in the backyard. Right. Oh my, there's a real home invasion. So now Luke and Garrett are being protected by Ashley from some unknown, shadows outside the windows. And
I do want to say they were being protected by Ashley. That was very impressive.
Oh, yeah.
She was like, you stay down here. I'm going to go upstairs in this other people's house for a kid that is not related to me with a knife and just fight off whatever's up there.
Oh, yeah. She was taking her responsibility very seriously.
That was impressive.
So there's all the trauma of Ashley and the two kids being chased around by these scary individuals. There's a brick through the window that says, you leave, you die. Mm-hmm. And eventually Garrett gets so scared that he's like, I'm out. I'm going to go home. And he bolts out the back door.
And he appears to get shot. And they shut the door and they're inside trying to hide. And now people come in the house. There are people stomping around the house looking for them with shotgun. Well, there's a person looking around for them with a shotgun. They're hiding. Then they get caught. Oh no, guy with the shotgun is right in front of them. And Ashley figures out that it's Garrett.
Right. She's like, hey, that's your mask.
So, again, same but on a bigger scale. Garrett was messing with them. And that's when we hit the real twist. Ashley's very angry, and she's stomping off, and Luke is like, wait a minute, Ashley. And she turns around and he slaps her so hard that she falls down the stairs and is knocked unconscious, not killed like it kind of looked like. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the whole thing was Luke wanting to tie her up and engage in a whole series of terrible, terrible crimes.
Right. So basically, he's in love with her. She's like 18, about to go off to college. He is 12.
Yeah.
He's in love with her. He doesn't like the men that she dates, thinks they're terrible, and has decided that he's the right person for her.
Sure. And we just went down a big rabbit hole trying to determine the difference between psychopath and sociopath with the help of Google.
And what we are seeing is that if he were an adult, he would be classified as a psychopath. He has all of the, lack of empathy, lack of emotional connections, narcissism. He's charming when he wants to be. He can imitate normal human behavior very well.
He was convincing.
But underneath it all, he doesn't have any remorse or caring for any other human beings aside from himself. He's completely driven by what he wants in each moment. So because he's 12, he can't possibly have any of these diagnoses. Like, I'm not sure exactly what the requirements are, but I know that sociopathy can't be diagnosed until you become an adult. And part of that, one of my notes actually, was how part of the reason for that is that normal teenage behavior and sociopath, psychopath type behaviors, things that could end up putting you in that category, tend to have a lot of overlap.
Yeah. I was going to make a joke about that, but you said it for real.
I mean,
very true.
Yeah. Which in this movie he was very obviously not a normal teenager, but his friend Garrett was kind of a normal teenager and actually was doing some pretty horrible things too. Was willing to go pretty far along.
That poor kid.
So, and while we're talking about twists, there's one final twist at the very end where we find out that he's doing this not even really because he's in love with Ashley, but because he wants his mother to love him again.
We find out that he said that. We don't find out that that's true. I feel like that's manipulation.
This is where we're going to start disagreeing about this movie, because I see what you're saying and it's very possible. And the reason I went the other way is that when Ashley refused to tell him, like there's that point right at the end, he's talking about that and she says, well, I know why she doesn't hug you, like why she doesn't rock you at night or what. There was something that he was like, she doesn't do this anymore. And Ashley was like, well, I know why. And that was the first part where she was in control.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, because he so badly wanted her to explain to him why his mother didn't come and rock him to sleep at night anymore. And when she wouldn't, like she just flat out, like she closes her eyes, she stops talking and she's like, I'm out, I'm done, I'm not. She just disengages completely. And that's the point where he finally kills her. Mm-hmm. And so that makes me feel like there was some truth to that statement.
I mean, I see that, but I think it's closer to that's the story he's built in his head. Because, we can reasonably say he killed this other kid's gerbil on purpose. Mm-hmm. And he was moving up the track towards serial killer all his life. And he's a psychopath who was going to do this. And this is the story he's built around that.
That's possible. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Editor's note. At this point, we went on a sidetrack for a good 15 minutes about how psychopaths work and sociopaths and what they mean in society and whether lawyers are psychopaths or not. And it went on and it was sort of interesting, but this podcast, as we recorded it, was well over an hour. So I got to trim it down to half an hour. Enjoy. One thing going on in this movie is that the two kids from The Visit,
which we reviewed last year,
play Garrett and Ashley in this movie. So it's kind of crazy that they're like, hey, you two are good.
Right.
Both come be in my movie.
Right.
Very strange.
It was distracting to me a little bit, actually, because in The Visit, they play the siblings.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
And then in this case, it's the babysitter and the neighbor kid. And so, like, the relationship was a little more distant. And I kept thinking it was Luke just because the Luke character was closer to the Ashley character. Uh-huh. But again, all three of these kids did a really, really nice job.
Well, I thought those two kids really did. I have questions about Luke. The way I put in my notes was not that he was a bad actor, because he wasn't, but that I didn't feel like he was strong enough to play this part. And I'm wondering if it was actually his acting or just the fact that he was a squeaky 12-year-old, that I was like, it's not really, menacing. He's not bigger than life.
So that brings up one of my notes. So at the beginning, the Luke character is acting all tough, and he's clearly the leader of Garrett, and he's the boss, right? And when Ashley's there and he's like, I'm going to drink this champagne and I'm going to put my hand on your leg, and he was being all alpha male, right? Even though he was 12 and it was weird.
Yeah.
And that kind of continues. Like, he gets the gun from his dad's bed and he's like waving it around and he's in charge of the situation, right? And then Ricky, Ashley's boyfriend, shows up and pushes his way in.
Yeah.
And at that point, the note I made was, because he doesn't have the gun. He left the gun with Garrett to keep Ashley under control. So Ricky pushes his way past Luke. And at that point, the note I made was, ooh, he's all squeaky and scared without his gun. Like, because it was like his voice was in that awkward 12-year-old range, and he suddenly was like stuttery and twitchy.
But was he putting on this performance as a psychopath trained in getting people to believe he's something else?
And the thing is, I think it works either way. Like, it felt like it was a conscious choice where the director was like, okay, I'm going to encourage you to use your, prepubescent, adolescent, like squeaky voice in this part of the movie because it's appropriate both for the misdirect, which is you're afraid because Ricky is more of an alpha male than you, and for the reality, which is he was pretending and letting Ricky think that he was more of an alpha male.
Yeah.
So I did notice that though, like he changed from scene to scene, his level of confidence seemed to shift.
Yeah.
But it felt like it was part of the story to me.
Yeah, I think that was fine. It was just sometimes he would deliver a line and I would feel like that was poorly done. But I don't know if it was poorly done or it was just that he is squeaky and little. And just didn't have the power behind it.
One of the things I liked about his acting was he really did a nice job of portraying someone who didn't care about other people. Particularly the points where he did something horrible, like taking the pencil to Ricky's face and the baseball bat to his head, and then he's like dancing down the hallway. Or toward the end when he's, setting it all up to look like an actual home invasion and to put all the blame on Jeremy, who is another of Ashley's exes, who he also lured to the house. He was like sort of waltzing his way around the house, and he did it in a way that was super creepy because it was very believable.
Yeah, he was creepy. Speaking of alpha males, this movie begins with some really questionable behavior by like 4 different characters. Pretty much everyone but Ashley, really. And there's some misogyny in this movie, is what I'm saying.
Here's where we're going to differentiate, because I think you use the word some, and I feel like there's a significant amount of misogyny in this movie.
Well, that's the tricky part, because obviously Garrett is a 12-year-old boy, so he's crude and inappropriate towards women. Luke is an evil psycho.
I would just like to point out that assumption that because he's a 12-year-old boy and therefore will be crude and inappropriate towards women, which I also was like, yep, this is a 12-year-old boy behavior. That is part of the misogyny. Okay, going on.
That's part of our culture. That is the way it is. And Luke, the evil psycho, has reason to be this way because he's an evil psycho. It's the mom and the dad that are really wow. And it kind of shows you that Luke didn't have much of a chance.
Right. They don't seem to like each other very much. They don't seem to like Luke very much. When Ashley shows up as this 18-year-old babysitter, both parents sort of seem to be like weirdly sexually inappropriate toward her.
One of my notes was everybody hits on the babysitter.
Everybody.
Yes. I don't think there was a single character who wasn't into her.
Maybe the pizza guy.
Yeah, I was weirded out that pizza guy was an actual pizza guy because they never showed his face.
and he sounded like he was disguising his voice.
But that was a misdirect because I think Garrett ordered that pizza that Luke and Ashley didn't order. Like Garrett was the one who made sure that pizza, or maybe Luke ordered it beforehand and lied about it. I don't know. Yeah, literally everybody else though wanted to get in Ashley's pants.
It's a little weird, especially with the dad who was like, hey, you're looking hot, teenage girl.
Right? She's like, oh, I'm getting ready to go, we're moving and I'm going to go to college. And he's like, did I give you permission to do that? And then there was this weird pause,
yes,
which was very believable because that's how I would have paused, where I would have been like, that's creepy and I don't know how to respond.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you see a movie like Spring Break Chicks Go Wild or something, that's a misogynistic movie taking advantage of women.
And the message behind it is women are trash and they are here simply for men to use, whatever.
And in this movie, it's like, are those the characters to tell a story which features a very strong female character that is really the best thing in the movie?
And probably one of the strongest female characters we've seen in a horror movie. Like,
possibly.
You don't get a lot of those really strong, really healthy female leads.
Yeah, it's not a superhero who's beating people up.
Right, or like Jamie Lee Curtis's character in Halloween, who is a strong female lead, but she's not super healthy.
No, she's got some issues. The question, I admit we had a little discussion before we had this discussion because this movie was difficult.
It was.
And I was like, this is how the movie is. It's got the strong female character. It's like built around her, and that's why these things are bad. Whereas Soli was like...
It was hard because I can't put my finger on it. I can't be like, this is why I feel like this is overall a misogynistic movie that might accidentally have made some good points. I think last night I described it as an aftertaste. Like just... In watching this movie, there was like this low-level feeling where I'm like, I don't know. And I thought about it some more since we had that talk.
Yeah.
And I think I would need to have more context. I think I would need to see more movies made by the same director or written by the same people to kind of get a sense for what were they trying to say. Like, was this a movie about how great Ashley was and her survival strategies? Or was this a movie about using Ashley to create a story and she just accidentally happened to be strong enough because that's what appeals? Like, that's the sort of ending that appeals to people. Like, I don't know. Because to me, it felt like some sort of toxic males probably created this movie. And then maybe there was a female writer on staff who was like, I'll be in charge of Ashley. Thank you. And
she kind of said last night.
Yeah, she sort of snuck this really, really strong feminist character into what felt like a toxic male movie to me.
And that reminds me that at the end of the movie, there is one final twist, which is it doesn't sound like much of a twist, but it got me big. Like, I have big notes on here. I wrote yay in all caps.
It literally saved the movie for me.
For me too. My note actually said that I was super mad at the movie. Okay, because just to not beat around this, Luke kills Ashley, and when that happened, I'm like, oh, she's not really dead. Obviously, that can't be. But then the movie went on, and it was like, yeah, she's just kind of dead. And
right, he sets up the whole scene. He's back in bed. His parents come home,
nice and safe for
find
him.
the bodies. The cops show up, and his mom is hugging him like he always wanted.
And then finally, at the very, very end, they're like, oh, was this even after the credits started?
It might have been.
Because there was a chunk after the credits. Yeah, so really far at the end, one of the cops yells, "This one's alive!" And they take her away, and it's extra good because she's being taken to the ambulance. He's looking out the window at her, and she just gives him the finger.
Right, she sees him, and she's just like, the bird. It was awesome. So it's very possible, like I was talking about, I would need the context. It's very possible that I could look at other things that these same people have made and realize, oh no, this was all intentional. Like, this was just a really screwed up character, and it's all things that this really screwed up character would have done. And it was all done with the purpose of getting to this one end where she survives and she's going to bring him down in the end.
Yeah, they have an extra second after the credits scene where, after she's taken away in the ambulance, he like turns to his mom and is like, "Oh, I'm so worried about Ashley. We should go see her in the hospital."
Right.
Which is kind of supposed to be like, "Oh no, he's going to get her." But I was like, yeah, nice try, kid. That's not happening.
Yeah.
You've lost.
I was afraid when he said, "I'm worried about Ashley," I was afraid that he was going to try to start talking about how she had something to do with this and like try to undermine so that when she blamed him, he had already set up, "Oh, she's going to try to say things about me," but that sort of thing, which would have been a little, I think I agree with you that going to the hospital, I'm like, yeah, you're not going to win. Like if you try, she's going to get you at some point.
Yeah.
But if he had done the psychological route, having seen his mom, I believe that she, like, if she decided that her son was the innocent, then she would have, like, gone to the mat. Like, that would have been the hill she died on. And he would have used that. And potentially Ashley could have ended up in some trouble.
She would have Beverly Goldberg'd that one.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think we've already kind of covered what I wanted to say about Ashley, but I want to just reiterate one more time that this is one of my favorite characters that we've come across in a very long time. At the same point that things started to go south and Luke, who had been pretending to be all mature, lost his maturity and started acting like a little kid, which we learn is acting. Like he wasn't that, but he started acting like that. When things start to go wrong, Ashley goes from kind of laid back, like, "Oh, I'm having a hard time making this kid stop drinking from the champagne bottle." Like, I was sort of like, she's not that great at doing her job. When stuff actually started to go wrong, she kicked it into high gear and she was like ready to defend these kids to the end.
Yeah.
And then when it turned on her and she had to defend herself, she was ready to do that to the end.
Yeah, there was only one part that bugged me about that, which was when she actually gets loose from her duct tape and she's out there, she's got a gun, she's pointing it at Luke, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever, you're not going to shoot me." And she finds out there's no ammo in the gun, so she can't shoot him. At that point, she decides to run away. And I'm like, you're 10 times as strong as this kid. And you've got a chair arm strapped to your arm. You could beat him senseless in 2 seconds.
Well, you had said that he hit Ashley and she went down the stairs at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think he had the gun in his hand and that's why it hurt.
Oh.
Like, I think he pistol whipped her. That's why she fell so hard.
Sense.
It wasn't just a slap.
Yeah.
She had the gun in her hand. Like,
yeah,
pistol whipped that little brat in return. But she didn't, because under it all, even though she was being attacked, even though, like, she tried to talk Garrett out of being part of it. And I think she wasn't just doing that for herself. I think she was really like, you're in danger whether you realize it or not. I need to save you with me if I can. Yeah. She tried to save Ricky when he was there. Like,
yes.
She was ultimately a really good person.
Yeah.
And
you can see, like, in this situation, this little kid doing this to you, the whole time, like, she was having a hard time with it. She's like, "Come on, just stop. This is stupid." And it took to that point where she was standing up there with the gun for her to really understand how bad it was, because he had just killed someone in front of her.
And even then, she fired that gun into the air.
Yeah, she wasn't shooting
She
at
didn't
him.
find out that it was empty because she shot at him.
Yeah.
She fired into the air. Like, she was the decent human being in this movie, and she stayed that way all the way through. And she did it in a way that was believable and likable. She wasn't grossly good. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's that, like, really preachy, "I'm too good for this world, I'm better than everyone else" person. Oh, like in
30 Miles from Nowhere.
Yes, that one character who everyone hated because he was a decent human being. Yeah, she was just such a well-written, amazing female character. And to find it in the middle of this movie was just made it even extra jarring, I think.
Now, speaking of how twisted and strange this movie was, you knew going in what I did, I think, that there was a home invasion, but it's more than it seems.
I think I saw the "it's more than it seems" piece mentioned somewhere.
Okay.
Very briefly.
So I had some ideas of what was going to be happening. They weren't what happened. what did you think was happening?
Well, so really, really early on, like Ashley's on her way to the house and she's on the phone with her mom.
Oh, yes.
There was that thing where like she almost hit a cat or something. And so she screeched to a stop. And then when she started driving, there was a black vehicle driving behind her, which was a complete red herring. Like that was just a vehicle driving behind her. But I was like, oh, like, are the parents in this house like into some, like, is the dad some kind of weird like CIA spy and there's information in the house and there's some kind of government agency gonna break in? Like, I was wondering if it was gonna go like espionage thriller kind of direction. But then, I think Luke raised red flags with me very early on.
Yeah, he was not doing good stuff.
And more so than just a normal 12-year-old. And maybe because I've known so many 12-year-olds, yeah, they're crude. They fart a lot. They, whatever. I'm sure they talk about sex with their buddies, but he was worse. He was creepier than I have ever seen a 12-year-old be. So I think it was pretty early on. Once it was, there are people trying to break into the house, I was like, oh, this is Garrett and Luke set this up. Like, this is their plan because they had talked about how if you trigger the horror endorphins, the fear endorphins, that it's the same as like romance or whatever.
Yeah,
and, he was going to,
works.
Right. He wanted her to be afraid so that she would then fall in love with him, which is terrible, terrible toxic masculinity.
But there was a mislead in that she put on a horror movie on TV and it was kind of working. Like he was getting to snuggle up next to her because she had the scary movie on.
She was tolerating it because she was...
I'm not saying she was into it.
Because you could see her thinking, okay, this is weird. And then she'd be like, he's 12, like stop reading so much into it. That's what it seemed like was going on. But then once Garrett came in, I was like, oh, okay, that's revealed. And then the guy with the gun was wandering around the house. At that point, I had no idea what was going on. And I was completely shocked when it turned out to be Garrett.
Yeah, me too. I had this whole thing after she's first there and she's kind of taking care of Luke a little bit. A spider goes across the counter and it is enormous.
It was big.
Not as big as a tarantula, but it's also not a tarantula. So like a giant normal spider, which is way creepier than a tarantula. And I'm like, that's not normal in this suburban house. And he takes it outside. And then later it shows up again on her face. 2
of them were up in the attic.
Oh, 2. I didn't even realize that. So I'm like, wait, so you leave, you die on the brick I felt like something terrible was going on in the world, like a giant spider infestation. And they're like, stay in your house. Although I don't know why they'd break a window to tell them to stay in their house.
Throw that message through the window on a brick.
Yeah. Yikes. But still, and then I'm like, the guy with the shotgun, is he like, the twist is going to be he's not searching for them. He's searching for spiders or something else. And
that would have been an interesting movie.
Like, is this going a sci-fi direction? But no.
Now, did you notice at the very end when he was cleaning everything up and setting it all up to look like it would, Jeremy had done it all, that he like collected up the spiders and put them back in a little cage? So clearly they were spider pets of his.
Yeah, which explained why they were exotic spiders.
Right. Okay, so there were a lot of really, really shocking scenes in this movie. Partly, I think, because a 12-year-old was doing them. Things that if an adult, like if Jason or Michael Myers was walking around doing these things, I would have been like, horror.
Yeah.
When a 12-year-old, especially a little kind of innocent, preppy-looking 12-year-old like Luke does some of these things, it just amps up the ick factor. There were a lot of these elements. The one I think we should really talk about is the Home Alone paint can
Mythbusters
style experiment that Luke decided to do.
So Ricky's tied up in a chair. He puts the chair under the stairwell, has a paint can on a rope, and he swings it out to come around and smack Ricky in the face.
Because he and Garrett had been having a discussion. They had watched Home Alone. They had been having a discussion about what would really happen.
Yes.
Would it push the bad guy back like it does in Home Alone, or would it not? And I think Garrett was the one who said it would just push them back, because then when he's like, we're going to really test it, Garrett was like, no, you're right. Let's not. Yeah. Like, I believe you, you're right.
Yeah. And I don't believe him. I didn't buy that scene. But I also did some Googling on that point. And according to people who did the math on Reddit, grain of salt, it's extremely harmful. But here's the deal. It would be going about 20 miles an hour, according to their math, and it weighs about 13 pounds. And so that's smashing into your face.
That's a lot of force.
That hurts. They described it as equal to Mike Tyson bare knuckle punching you twice, which obviously is going to break your nose at least. But kill you? I don't know about that.
I feel like it would do more than break your nose. I think a lot of the bones in your face are going to be broken.
Sure, that's fine, though. No big deal. Here's the big deal for me, though. Ricky was not taped to the floor. His neck was not taped to the chair. He saw that coming at him. He would have moved his head and gotten like a glancing blow at worst. Like no human being would get hit by this.
Unless,
he would have even knocked himself over easily.
Would he have had time? I guess it's possible.
It was in slow motion.
He was blindfolded.
Oh, he was blindfolded.
They put
that's true.
They put one of the dad's cheesy, colorful Christmas ties around his face.
Okay, well, the thing that bugged me earlier about that scene was that no one else did anything, because you swing that thing out there, Ashley could have just run up and smacked it aside, you know? Like, this isn't a speeding bullet.
Right. It
happened.
It was questionable. I'm a little concerned because it adds to the, well, what would really happen? I'm like, let's not encourage other 12-year-olds to do Mythbuster-style experiments.
They don't have to, because that Reddit thread actually showed a high-speed video of, like, Mythbuster-style ballistics gel over skull getting hit by a paint can.
Nice.
It was devastating, but it was, like, strapped in place as opposed to being able to move and flex back when you get hit and all that. So I don't buy it.
There is a possibility that it would cause, like, just your brain rattling around inside your skull might cause enough, like, some pretty significant brain trauma there. And that kind of like, your body sitting still and your head getting hit with something at that speed, there could be some kind of, like, internal decapitation sort of issue.
Very artsy.
Yeah. At any rate, I don't feel the need. One of the most traumatizing shots of the whole movie for me was immediately after that. Like, already I was, like, gasping for air because of the shock of it. And then it just shows underneath him where just, like, this mustard yellow paint is coming down with, like, streaks of red in it.
Yeah.
It was well done and horrific and appalling. And it made me think of the fact that I have a flash fiction piece that I wrote about a couple having a disagreement over some redecorating ideas. And in that story, she bashes her husband's head in with a paint can, and I wrote it so it's not that scary to me. And then I watched somebody else write something like that, and I was like, oh, that's really awful.
Yeah.
So now I'm a little afraid to, like, share this story anywhere because it's really, really awful.
Yeah. One last thing I want to bring up is that when they thought they were being home invaded, they're like, they want to call the cops. Oh no, the phone's dead. They want to use their cell phones. They're not working. I guess there was a jammer in use. Nobody talked about that. And
like
then,
the computers, the Wi-Fi.
This is the thing. Then they go to the computer, they open it up, and they're like, the Wi-Fi network, it's gone. What? Worst thing in the whole movie. That is 10 times as traumatizing as any paint can to the face.
That is pretty
or sexual
horrific.
Harassment we didn't talk about.
Pretty horrific. It reminds me of one of the notes that I made, though, that is, it's not easy to isolate characters like this in a modern, in a movie set in modern times with all modern technology in a suburban setting. Like, there were houses right there. Like, it was pretty skillful the way the writers managed to isolate them and took away all the technology in ways that were relatively believable and kept them in the house with the whole, the brick through the window and then the idea that Garrett got shot when he left. That kept Ashley in the house. Like, after that point, it was a long time before she decided to risk running away again.
And then she almost gets into sight of other people and gets smacked with the brick again.
Right. So through the whole movie, too, there are carolers walking around this like suburban neighborhood. Like, she should
this
not...
is a Christmas movie, by the way.
Oh, yeah. She should not have been so isolated, but at the same time, I fully believed the isolation. I mean, it was a fancy suburban neighborhood. It wasn't like, quarter acre
houses
lots.
next to each other.
Ratings. I'm sort of glad that we waited to do this review until the next day so that I had a little bit of time to kind of mull it over. Mm-hmm. I think I like it better now, having like settled with it and gotten a little bit away from how really terrible it was, like horrifying it was. I think I'm going to rate it higher now than I would have if we had done this immediately after watching it.
Okay.
That being said, I'm still not entirely sure. I'm not ready to fully condemn this movie as misogynistic garbage at a core level that just happens to have a really great female character. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that that's what it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You were saying something interesting last night about this movie, about how it felt like it was just made for the shock value. Like the idea that a 12-year-old is doing all this is the most shocking thing they could come up with. And was there any higher purpose?
Yeah, I had forgotten that I said that. And gosh, I'm smart. No.
I know, isn't it amazing?
I still don't know that I recognize really a higher purpose. I think it could be that they intended Ashley surviving and staying good throughout the whole thing, throughout her whole ordeal, as being the higher purpose. And in that case, I mean, I can accept that. I would buy that. And if it had been presented in a way where I was confident that that's the case, I would probably give this movie like a 4+. I liked it. But because I'm not confident, it's sort of like when you listen to a comedian and you're like,
oh yeah,
you're funny, but I'm sort of afraid that you're being funny because you mean these things and not because you're saying them sarcastically.
I know who you're talking about.
Like, I'm not sure if I think you're funny or not. And that makes me leery of rating it highly, which is unfortunate for them. Yeah. Because maybe they're great people.
They're going to suffer because of this.
Right? I mean, maybe they're great people and I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not. So I think it was well done. I liked the acting. There were a lot of unexpected twists, which is a nice treat with horror movies. And it certainly was horrific. So I'm still going to give it 4 cell phones in a fish tank out of 5. But I think it could have had half a point or even maybe a full point more if I were sure that it was the good movie I hope it is rather than the bad movie I'm afraid it is.
You know, I was thinking of that unit of measurement and then I thought, did we just use wet cell phones as our measurement last time? I don't remember. I don't know what movie we watched last, but it sounded really familiar to me. But this is different. They're in a fish tank.
Yes.
I thought we would have very different ratings from each other, and I had picked my number when I thought that, and my number was 4 cell phones in a fish tank out of 5, because I really liked this. I was really bought in, and it was really well done. Like, I agree that there's some questions about what they're saying, and I like the analogy of the comedian. I think that's very appropriate. But the whole movie's about Ashley. She's at the center of it all. I'm going with Ashley, and I mean, I was ready to cheer at the end of the movie. Like, I was so upset at the killing part because, like, that did not fit this movie until it did.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. When that last scene where she flips him the bird and I'm like, oh, she's alive. Yay. She's going to survive. I wrote, good girl, Ashley, and put 3 hearts after it. Like, I was very excited too.
Yeah. So I felt good about it. Felt bad and then good. And that transition is the best feeling.
Well, hopefully we can feel just as good about the movie we watch tomorrow.
Let's discuss how we sound. I'm chewing nuts loudly.
That sounds Disgusting. I'm clicking my pen loudly.
It's not a good example of how we're going to sound.
What nuts did you eat?
Smokehouse almonds.
Oh.